Trey Lance, huh? That's where we're at. 8 days away from the draft. We have arrived at Trey Lance. All right, let's go there. Let's go in the locker room.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock. Localize.
All right, so it's 8 days away from the NFL draft. We've gone through around here after Deshaun Watson. We've gone through Tyrod Taylor. We've gone through Davis Mills. We've gone through Kyle Allen. And there was a time where we thought maybe it would be Bryce Young. And here we are 8 days away from the draft. And we're discussing Trey Lance. I got to tell you, if this had happened 2 days ago, I would have been extremely disgusted. And I would have been extremely dismissive. And I'm sure if you've asked me in this stream, which, by the way, it's the locker room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 610 in the Odyssey app. But if you would have asked me, I probably would have been disgusted. But as one of my mentors once told me, and I use this quote quite often, Jean-Jacques Taylor, shout out to Professor Taylor. Congratulations on the Deion Sanders book and everything you got going on, JJT, as well as a lot of working out by you. Sports are fluid. What's true today is not true yesterday or tomorrow, is what JJT used to tell me. And sometimes in life, you got to adjust. And you don't want one screw up to turn into multiple screw ups quite often. And the mishandling of the end of last season has us to a point where instead of celebrating the arrival of Bryce Young, hell, they might have already agreed to terms with Bryce Young. Instead of getting the billboards ready for Bryce Young, Dr. Pepper signs all that. Now we're to a point where we're talking about rookie quarterbacks and we're talking about Trey Lance. And we're talking about a serious possibility of perhaps the Houston Texans not drafting a quarterback. So this is where we are with Trey Lance. And if I hadn't spent all of yesterday talking about Will Levis potentially being the number 2 pick, Trey Lance would sound a lot worse to me a couple of days ago. But if we're comparing kicking the tires on Trey Lance and trading whatever cost there is and whatever draft equity you have to give up for Trey Lance, which it's not going to be a first-round pick, might not even be a second, and comparing that to using a number 2 pick on Will Levis, sign me up for Trey Lance every time. Every time. Could be wrong. Quarterbacks make fools of us all, which we'll get into in a minute. But if we're talking about drafting Will Levis number 2 or kicking the tires on Trey Lance, I'm going to kick those tires till I break all 10 of my toes. So that's where I'm at right now. And that's where we're at right now. Now the questions, and we'll go through the questions. Subscribe, like, right along. We're going to go live tonight. Got someone who's probably very against this joining me. Also, be on the lookout. Gary Kubiak, talked to him this morning. What a swell fellow that Gary Kubiak is. We talked about team building. That one's going to drop tomorrow morning. Always great to hear from Coach Kubiak. I tried to put him in each of DeMeco Ryan's situations, and Gary did not disappoint. Classy mofo, that Gary Kubiak. But let's tackle the questions of this Trey Lance thing. Question number 1, what are the options? What are the other options when it comes to quarterback? Option 1, I think a lot of you might be down with. Draft a quarterback at number 2. Hopefully you have a specific person that you like. I can get down with anyone who says I'm a Will Levis guy. Specific name. I'm a Anthony Richardson guy. I'm a CJ Stroud guy. I can get down with specific names. What I can't get down with is draft a quarterback just to draft a quarterback. I think that's a dangerous game to play. Now, some might say, well, it's not that risky. You still have extra picks. It's not that risky. But if they've done their evaluation and they don't think that any of these guys warrant handing the keys to the franchise to, why do that? Just because? Just because you need a quarterback? I've heard people, and I've had people call into the show, and there's been some comments in here say, well, and I saw Peter King say it too. Well, the fans just need some excitement. They need, they need a quarterback. And I agree that a quarterback can bring excitement, the right quarterback. But do you really think the Texans are going to draft CJ Stroud, Will Levis, or Anthony Richardson, and all of a sudden the phones are going to be ringing off the hook for season tickets? Like, is that going to just all of a sudden like increase the excitement? I think DeMeco Ryans has increased the excitement. I don't think you draft a quarterback just to draft a quarterback. So if you like a specific guy and you want to go with a rookie, a specific rookie, cool. But just draft a quarterback, come on. You got to give me something more than that. You can do whatever you want, but give me a little bit something more than that. Other options, Davis Mills. Yikes. Case Keenum. Do you trade for Mac Jones? Maybe trade for Zach Wilson? Could there be a trade with the Raiders where Jimmy Garoppolo comes? Of all these options, Trey Lance doesn't sound like the worst one. You do got to assess the cost, though. Trey Lance cost versus the cost of a rookie quarterback, and the cost of a rookie quarterback is likely going to be pick 2, maybe pick 12. But if you're drafting a guy at pick 12, although it's not at pick 2, you're still asking him to do the same thing. You're still asking him to do the same thing. Now, does it have to be a long commitment? Maybe you could punt on him like the Cardinals did on Josh Rosen if an opportunity presents itself. But the cost of a number 2 or a number 12 overall pick is way more significant than whatever it would cost to trade for Trey Lance. And the hesitation is obvious. And I can feel the hesitation. I can 100% feel the hesitation of wanting to trade for Trey Lance. Because if Kyle Shanahan wants to give up, and I've heard this said, and I've said it myself, if Kyle Shanahan wants to give up on Trey Lance after 2 seasons with all they gave up, that should tell you all you need to know about Trey Lance, which is true. Or it could also tell you that they feel that they struck gold with Brock Purdy. Much like when the New England Patriots made Drew Bledsoe the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and then they found Tom Brady in the late rounds, and they decided they could move on from Drew Bledsoe. Now, Drew Bledsoe was a much more proven quarterback, and I'm not even trying to compare Brock Purdy to Tom Brady, but I'm just saying, like, just because you made an investment doesn't mean that you ignore someone that you may have gotten a little bit later and invested less in. You don't, there's not a reason to do that. And there's also proof of it. And I think this is the real lesson that people might not want to mention. And in a way, I think it's a different way to look at it outside of, well, you got to draft a quarterback at 2 instead of Trey Lance. This is the real lesson, at least through my eyes. The real lesson here is that just because you take a quarterback in the top 5 doesn't mean you're guaranteed to have a franchise quarterback, especially in a crapshoot when it comes to quarterbacks. Because think about the 3 of the names that I just mentioned in the first 10 minutes of this video. I mentioned Zach Wilson, number 2 overall pick in 2021. I mentioned Trey Lance, the number 3 overall pick in 2021. I mentioned Mac Jones, who went later on in that draft. And 2 of the teams, it appears, the 2 that selected in the top 5, they're willing to move on 2 years down the line. And the Mac Jones, who actually had the best rookie season of all of them, Mac Jones, many believe they might move on from him. and they won't even commit to him. So this notion that you just take a quarterback just to take a quarterback, the Trey Lance thing and the Zach Wilson and the Mac Jones and the names that we're mentioning, they're actually showing that there's no exact science to it, and there's no guarantee when you take a quarterback in the top 5. It's about value. Would I trade number 2 overall pick for Trey Lance? Nah. But do I feel more comfortable rolling the dice on Trey Lance for a couple third-round picks, or maybe a third-round pick that can turn into a 2, than I do using a top 5 pick on the rookies? That's a question the Texans are going to have to ask. But I do think the lesson here is Trey Lance was taken in the top 5. Zach Wilson was taken in the top 5. Mac Jones was taken a couple of years ago. And these guys are on the streets right now. Let's just look at a list. These are the quarterbacks taken in the top 5 in the last 20 years. Let's count how many of them are franchise quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence, probably. That's 1. Zach Wilson, no. Trey Lance, no. Joe Burrow, yes. Tua, maybe. Kyler, maybe. Baker Mayfield, no. Sam Darnold, no. Mitch Trubisky, no. Jared Goff, no. Carson Wentz, no. Jameis Winston, no. Marcus Mariota, no. Blake Bortles, no. Andrew Luck, could have been. RG3, no. Cam Newton, yes. Sam Bradford, no. Matthew Stafford, yes. Mark Sanchez, no. Matt Ryan was. Jamarcus, no. Vince Young, no. Alex Smith, no. Eli and Rivers, you can say yes. So there's no exact science to it. And the overwhelming majority of those were number 1 overall picks that we said maybe to. Or maybe or yes to. Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick. Joe Burrow, number 1 overall pick. Kyler, number 1 overall pick. Luck, number 1 overall pick. Stafford, number 1 overall pick. Eli, number 1 overall pick. Just depends how you look at it. What would the cost be? I would say probably a 3 and something else. I've heard number 33. I don't even think it's worth pick 33 at this point. But would you rather have Trey Lance than Davis Mills? And I've seen some of the numbers where you're putting Trey Lance's career stats against Davis Mills. Just stop that. You know there's a little bit more to it. I do find it interesting that, and Peter Schrager brought this up on Good Morning Football, Kyle Shanahan ran Trey Lance 16 times, I think, in 4 quarters. He might just not fit into what Kyle Shanahan wants. Kyle Shanahan, though, is a good enough coach to where he can overcome these types of things. He can overcome these mistakes. And quite frankly, the Jets are doing the same thing with Zach Wilson. So I don't know that it's that much of an indictment. This is the most important question, though. And we've been asking this about Mac Jones when we've talked about the Mac Jones possibility. What do Bobby Slowick and DeMeco Ryans think of Trey Lance? Bobby Slowick was the film guy with Kyle Shanahan. He was at least involved in the process that led to the 49ers selecting Trey Lance. Obviously, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan had the final say. What does Bobby Slowick, though? What does he think about Trey Lance? What does DeMeco think about Trey Lance? What do you think about Trey Lance? That's most important. Shout out to the people. Put in the comments, subscribe, like, all that type of stuff. I got to tell you, I would have completely been opposed to this, but after a day of talking about Will Levis as the number 2 pick, a little more open to it than I thought I would be. Furthermore, given the other options, little Trey Lance action with Dameon Pierce in the backfield. Maybe you get some Bijan Robinson action too. Little zone read with Bijan, Trey Lance, and Dameon Pierce. Maybe a trade back with Atlanta. CJ Stroud visited this week. Get 3 1s for next year. Kick the tires on Trey. Go get your quarterback next year. Again, I was opposed to this too. It all goes back to the fact that it ain't Bryce. These are the discussions we're having. Instead of just the Bryce Young party. The other thing too, and this is something to keep an eye on, Maybe DeMeco Ryans is fooling all of us. Maybe he's pulling a Kyle Shanahan from 2021 when he basically laughed at the media and laughed at jackasses like me and NFL reporters trying to figure out what the hell he was going to do when he ended up taking Trey Lance. So maybe DeMeco's messing with us. Maybe it is CJ Stroud. After all this, maybe it's a rookie. Who knows? We will know in 8 days, though. And no matter what happens, just remember, when it comes to this Texans game, when it comes to all this, when it comes to the possibility of Trey Lance, no matter what happens, we are all in this together. Have a good one.
Yeah, it's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock.